Hi, this is Deborah Arca with the Pathos Book Club, and I have the privilege of interviewing Matt Litton today, who is the author of a brand new book called Holy Nomad, The Rugged Road to Joy. Hi, Matt. How are you?
How you doing, Deborah?
I'm doing well, thanks. Great title, Holy Nomad. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but I was really struck by one sentence from the back cover, which says, "This book is an invitation from your life sentence." What do you mean by that?
The book, the whole journey for this book. First of all, this is not a self-help book. It's not a five steps to joy or anything like that. This book kind of began in my basement, in a situation where I was surrounded. I was writing in the basement for a little peace and quiet, and I was surrounded by kind of the trappings of those material things that I thought I just needed to have. Things like that, to pictures of lost loved ones. And as I was writing, I started to think about the fact that when I look around my religious culture, when I look around culture, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of joy. And it's kind of a meditation on there's this strain of nomadicism that runs throughout the entire biblical narrative. From Abraham, and it's really embodied in Jesus. And of course, Jesus is the title of the book, The Holy Nomad. And this idea that we kind of immerse ourselves, we bury ourselves in these unfinished basements. I don't know about you, but it's the unfinished basement, it's the storage spaces of our lives where that's where the things end up that we obsess over. The latest technology we have to have. Even our accomplishments and our trophies and the things that mean so much to us. I know my father had a Salesman of the Year award that's in my unfinished basement, and so that's kind of the meditation. But that we pursue these things that are quite meaningless and bring us absolutely no joy. And in that process, we are actually burying ourselves in these cells. Early in the book, I talk about what I call spiritual Stockholm syndrome. If you look through the Bible, I go back to the Exodus and I look at how God frees his people from Egyptian slavery, and they haven't been freed for but a month or so. And they start, in fact, they threaten to stone Moses because they want to go back to kind of the perceived safety of their captivity. They say, at least we had food to eat. And this is after seeing the miracles, that God did in their lives. And that's kind of another theme throughout the Bible. Not only is meaning and joy found in this nomadic journey, but we as people are always wanting to put ourselves back into slavery. And I talk about early in the book, we kind of live with this spiritual Stockholm syndrome. And Stockholm syndrome, of course, comes from the 1970s. There was a situation in Sweden where there was a bank robbery, and psychologists studied it because the captives in this hostage situation actually developed this attachment to their captors, and so that's where the name comes. But we develop that same attachment to the meaningless, to the dead spaces in our lives. And even though we've been called out of that into something more meaningful. And so that's kind of where the journey of Holy Nomad begins.
And this journey was, this book is written out of your, it's very much of a personal experience. I mean, it's really a meditation on your own, where you have been and where you found yourself. And you had a crash in your life. You talk about the crashes in our lives that move us forward, or that kind of wake us up and bring something new to life for us. And so there was a literal crash in your life. Do you think we all have to experience some crash before we actually start off on this journey?
I think a crash is part of the human condition. It happens for us. It's not something that God causes. It is sometimes. Sometimes it's out of our control. Sometimes it's because of these things we collect. It's because we're in that cell. I tell a story in the book that's kind of personal. But crashes in our lives, it can be losing that job that you have worked so hard for. It can be not getting the promotion. It can be a real tragedy, like losing a family member, losing a child. And I go to the Bible and I look at the crash moments in the Bible. The Tower of Babel falling down, Adam and Eve eating the fruit, and it's the climatic moment where people have this clarity that, hey, I am not experiencing the fullness of the life God calls me to, and that really is what joy is to me. C.S. Lewis says joy is the real business of heaven. And I love the way he describes joy. He says, once you experience it, you will want it again and again. And one of the things I did in the book is I tried to avoid defining what joy is, other than it's that thing that Jesus calls real life, eternal life. And it's found out on this journey. Well, these crash moments, for me, it was the untimely death of my younger sister and her baby. And it was this moment when we were moving out of town. And I talk about, I don't know if you've ever been in a car crash, there really is this strange moment of silence where you're almost stunned and the world seems to slow to a stop. And I think we have those moments in our lives, and it allows us to reflect on what's truly meaningful, what's truly fulfilling, where the joy truly is, and how far we are from that. And this book is really kind of an exploration of what does that mean and where do I find that? And that's where nomadicism was born, this idea that getting ourselves out of the cell and following this holy nomad, this nomadic character named Jesus, that's where real joy is experienced. But it starts in those crash moments.
Yeah. And I love that you spend a good bit of time, maybe a whole chapter, talking about this kind of the romanticized notion of a nomad versus what you're really talking about. So versus leaving everything behind and escaping and going out into the world and having no responsibilities. But that's really not the nomadic life you're talking about.
No, and I love, the Hollywood, our cultural romance with nomads. It goes back to, the rock stars that travel around in a van or I think of Kane from Kung Fu who travels the country with he's got great purpose but no real direction. And I talk about the A-Team or Jack Kerouac and his friends. I know that movie's coming out soon and On the Road, driving down big American highways. But real spiritual nomadicism is actually a commitment. It's a responsibility. It's self-sacrifice. When you say nomadic, you think you think about those things. You think about traveling the world with no ties, no responsibilities. But it really is stepping into an ultimate kind of responsibility. And I think if you're truly spiritually nomadic, you can do it from the same zip code your whole life. So,
that's what I was going to ask you. Do you have to even leave home to be a spiritual nomadic?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of nomadicism that I'm talking about is I am nomadic in the sense that I am tied to nothing but the Holy Nomad, this Jesus character. And the nomadic idea, I say it's embodied in Jesus. He has this conversation with a big shot in the church of his day, this guy named Nicodemus, who's one of the big time preachers, and Jesus is a little scandalous to talk to, and so Nicodemus sneaks out at night to go speak with him, and he asks Jesus, he says, hey, what does it mean to be born from above, to follow you? And Jesus responds, you need to be willing to be moved this way and that by the Spirit of God, because no one knows where it's going next or where it comes from. And he paints this beautiful picture, and he's using the Hebrew language. The ancient cultures use the same language for wind and spirit, and he's using that idea of the wind and the way it moves. It's a nomadic God, and to follow that nomadic God, you have to be nomadic. I think one of my favorite writers is theologian Walter Brueggemann. He talks about, in the Old Testament, he talks about God as being the God on the move. And so when I talk about Jesus as the embodiment of the nomad, that's what I'm talking about. And I think true nomadicism is being willing just to be tied to that person, to be moved this way and that by the Spirit of God.
It's not always easy to begin this journey and to leave our life, as difficult as it may be. It's comfortable, and it's been our cell.
That's our story as the people of God. That's our story as just people. I think I begin the book talking about this character who's locked in the cell, and this nomadic figure who just seems to be dripping with real life. Laughter, tears, wine. I mean, everything about this man seems real, and he frees this POW, and this POW just can't bring himself to leave. And I feel like that. I feel like we are like that with our materialism. We're like that. We're like that with our religion, with our faith. We feel secure and unwilling to take that step. I think the beautiful thing about God that I learned on this journey with the book is that and the point that I'm trying to make in that is that we do have a choice. And I think there's a lot of voices in culture right now that tell us, you are a product of your genetic makeup. You're a product of the way your brain is hardwired, the way your grandfather's brain was hardwired. You are a product. Your actions and your beliefs are interpreted by your community. But that's simply not the gospel. Jesus says, Jesus opens that cell door and says, take that step out. And the beautiful thing, I think one of the beautiful things I discovered as I worked through this and wrestled with the theology of this is that, the great thing about that character that unlocked that cell door, no matter how long you stay in that cell, he is there waiting. And I think that's, that's one of the beautiful things that I think I discovered on this personal journey. And it really is an invitation. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor of some Godzilla-sized megachurch. This book is an invitation to kind of wrestle with me, to journey with me through this, and see what you think.
And I love that you bring in pop culture. Every chapter starts with lyrics from a song, from whether it's Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen or
Mumford and Sons.
Mumford and Sons. I was going to say thank you, Mumford and Sons. Love, it will not betray you, dismay, or enslave you. It will set you free to be more like the man you are made to be.
Yeah, I found we love music in my house, and it's always been kind of a speak. But one of the beautiful things I think that's happening in popular culture and music right now, we talk about the church receding a little bit, and less folks regularly attending church, and it seems that the more that happens, the more spiritual our music is becoming. And I don't know if you saw the chart. I think it was Martin Sheen did that movie, The Way.
The Way. I just saw that recently.
What a beautiful movie.
It was such a beautiful movie.
Yeah. And I'm starting to get kind of old, I guess. But I listened to the Wallflowers the other day, and I think one of their songs is A Hospital for Sinners. And Mumford and Sons has a good deal of spirituality in their music, so that's pretty cool for me. I enjoy that.
Yeah. So you also prescribe some tools or some suggestions for things you might want to take along the way on your journey. Tell us about a few of those.
We really identify ourselves as consumers. And I think understanding the difference, and it sounds simple, but understanding the difference between want and need in our culture is a huge first step. And I walk through some biblical examples of Jesus saying, hey, I will provide you with everything that you truly need. And I talk about some personal things, just silly things like, checking to see when the next smartphone is coming out, like every day, because I was obsessed. I wanted it. But I also talk about, I think there's a serious problem in our culture when, I talk about one particular instance. I was visiting Nashville for Thanksgiving with family, and I was going out for a run, and it was Black Friday. And I got back from my run and turned the radio on, and the angry shoppers at a superstore had trampled somebody in line. And I remember listening to that story and thinking, we really need to radically change the way we see the value we place on these things. And just, I talk about how empty that is. I think that's the first tool to understand what needs are. The second tool that I talk about, it's kind of related. We are conditioned to be consumers, but the thing we don't realize, there are billions of dollars spent to make us feel inadequate. You know what I mean? To make us feel like we're less than what God intended us to be. And I talk about this idea that to be truly nomadic. In the Old Testament, I had a professor tell me once that there's this word called zealom. And I think the idea, the ancient culture's idea was when a king would take over a country, he would set up little statues of himself. And I think that they were called zealoms. And that's who we are. We are reflections of the true God, and yet we allow ourselves to be defined by the billions of dollars spent on advertising to make us feel inadequate without this makeup or without this dress or without this phone. That chapter is called The Gospel of the Joneses, and it's really about learning to be. I love Brennan Manning, and I remember hearing him preach, and he told a story about somebody telling him to be who you is. And I kind of go back to that over and over again of discovering our identity in God, and I think that's the second tool. in being nomadic. And the last two tools, and probably the most important, our imagination is so important. And for thousands of years, I feel like God has gifted us with the imagination to kind of bridge the gap between the reality of the problems today and this eternal vision of the way He wants the world to be. And it can be little things. I'm a huge basketball fan. I think Jerry West talked about, in his biography, talked about the importance of imagining himself doing these things on a basketball court and how that was his edge in playing. And oftentimes I think that the Beatitudes are this challenge to us. Blessed are the poor, and we are supposed to bridge that gap with our imaginations, the power of our imaginations, and so that's kind of a tool for us. I think we are coming out of a culture where we have aligned faith against science and against progress and against learning, when faith really is imaginative and beautiful, and it's reaching out to the future and connecting. And so I talk about that a little bit, and finally, questions.
Yeah.
I think questions are the lifeblood of relationships, and I think it's one of the most powerful things you can carry in your journey toward God. I think it's the questions that lead you out of the dead places, out of the cells in your life. If you think about your meaningful relationships, your marriages, your real good friendships, they are only as tested as your willingness to ask those questions. As people of faith, we need to be driven by a curiosity, and we can't continue to live in a culture that says, our answers are black and white, and this is just, if you think about it, Jesus left God with a pretty heavy question, in His final words. I think living in that and pushing toward that and understanding that questions are the lifeblood of a relationship, and that's what we have. We have a relationship with this nomadic character.
Yeah.
So those are the tools that carry us on this journey, if we will use them. They're not material, but they're powerful.
Or what was the hardest thing about writing this book? Was there anything you really struggled with when you were writing?
The truth is, when you really start wrestling with what it means to be nomadic, you have to travel with people. You have to travel together. And I think the difficult thing for me is, you start to learn, it's your community of faith might be people you don't like all that much. You know what I mean? And you're still called to be there for them. And that being nomadic means you do not travel alone. A long time ago, I was flown out to Colorado for a job interview, and I stayed at Garden of the Gods. And I got up in the morning, and I went around back. I was going to go for a jog, and I started about 15 feet up the trail, and I saw this huge sign, "Beware rattlesnakes." And immediately I was like, hey, that's it. I hit the showers, and there was no run for me. But I really feel like when we try to set out to do spirituality alone, and I say this early in the book, that we live in this kind of don't ask, don't tell culture of spirituality. You know what I mean? It's like it's my spirituality.
That's right.
That's just not biblical, and it's not nomadic, and we have to not only share our location on the trail, and I use that metaphor, but we have we have to be willing to listen to those people who are ahead of us, those people who are behind us. We really do need each other, and I think growing spiritually, that was probably one area of my life that I really wrestled, and it was a real growing experience for me to write about that.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Well, you give us a lot to wrestle with in your book, and a lot to aid us on our own journeys. So thank you so much. Holy Nomad, The Rugged Road to Joy by Matt Litton. Go to the Pathos Book Club and check it out. We'll have reviews by other bloggers and some other interviews and some video you can check out. Thanks so much, Matt. Good luck
Thanks
on your
for having me.
blessings on